So based on the research, the factors driving currency values are the following: colon, 1, high and rising labor and productivity rates and profitability, in corporations, comma, 2, capital flows from outside the country into a safe haven country, comma, 3, and usually you'll have like 5 elements. And the 5 elements should be around your five papers that you did in research. Okay. Therefore, we recommend multinational corporations to implement the following 6 policies. So what you can do is you can lay out, that would be your thesis statement, where basically it's just like the memo that you wrote. It's a very high-level sentence with elements in it. So the elements that derive currency values, this is just an example, and the 5 policy recommendations that you would make. Then you would say, underneath it, you would say the first factor driving currency values are, and then you do a sentence, maybe a semicolon. The second factor driving currency values, comma, is, and then you do basically have a paragraph. And then lastly, based on these factors, the recommendation, the following are the policy recommendations. First, the first policy is blah, 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 you have a sentence around. Second policy is a sentence around it, justifying what it is, saying a little something about it. So basically you have the thesis statement, your major takeaways and the recommendations, then you have your, the factors, with some takeaways around it, and then the recommendations with some takeaways around it. So that's basically 3 or 4 paragraphs in the abstract. Okay. And again, read the abstracts from the papers that you read. Okay, those will give you a really good idea. And then the next one is going to be the outline. Right? The outline, and it's just like your memo. The capitalization's bold in 16-point font. And then you're going to have what is introduction. I would probably make this either 14 or 16 point. Number 2 is going to be article number 1. Give me an abbreviated title. Okay, some of these titles are not very good. They're just titles that try to make it very academic. Just tell me what it is. Labor productivity. Well, we know that labor productivity drives currency values, so just say labor productivity. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Article number 2. 4. You guys know Greek? Greek letters? Greek letters? I'm going to do, this is kind of high level outline. Okay, so then your paper, the actual paper.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Is the
go ahead.
outline like our table of contents?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I'm a big, some people like to put the abstract after the outline. I like to put, oh shoot, forgot something. I've got the references. Okay. So abbreviate the titles. Okay, make it, don't use the actual titles because the titles, you know, sometime are, they don't make sense. I mean, they do, but the thesis is in the title. So you just give me the factors, right? You know, what the major takeaway was from the article as from the title. Does that make sense? Because if you're doing currency valuations, they're talking about labor productivity, then you would say labor productivity. Or labor productivity effects on currency values. The next one could be, you know, international capital flow effects on currency values. Geopolitical and institutional development on currency values. The development of capital market and financial institutions on currency values, something like that. And at some point, you take out the currency values because it's redundant. Okay, so that's what I would do. And then you have your conclusions and your recommendations. Okay, and if you do a really good job, your conclusions and your recommendations is really your introduction. Is really your introduction. Because basically, what I usually do is I will write my paper, I will do my introduction first, with the conclusions, recommendations. Then I will read the papers, I will write the paper, and what I will do is I will get to my conclusions and recommendations here. And the conclusions and recommendations will be a lot better than my initial introduction, because I'd already done the analysis. So it's all fresh in my mind. So I can really write the conclusions and recommendations from what I've learned from the 5 articles and synthesize it within this conclusion and recommendation. And then what you do, this is what we do in business, and this is what they do in academics. Academics will put all of the most important conclusions and recommendations at the end of the paper. Or in business, we take the most important conclusions and recommendations and put it at the beginning, and put it at the front.
So, is the introduction similar to the abstract?
It is. There's some overlap between the introduction and the conclusions and recommendations in the abstract. So you really want to refresh. You know, and the conclusions kind of tell us what you did. You know, what were the major factors and the policy recommendations, and then get into a little bit more detail. Okay, and then really focus on the recommendations because that's the most important part. So really, your conclusions and recommendations becomes your memo that goes on the front of the report. Right? Because you need a memo on the front of the report. Then your report's going to be bound. Then you put the memo, which you already know how to do a memo, goes right underneath the plastic cover of the report. Okay, and then you bind the report. So I want to sign off on the report so that you can show this report to a potential employer for internships and jobs. Same thing with your memos. Okay, so that's another one of the products. Okay, from the class that we'll take away. Okay, all right. Any questions? Okay. So the first is going to be the title of the paper. And I actually like there's no page numbers on any of these. Okay. There's no page number on the title page. There is an I, little mini I, here like that on the abstract, and there's mini I on the outline. And then some people like to put the page numbers there. I like to have the page numbers there. Okay, some people like to put them up there. I like to put them down in the right-hand corner. And some people like to put in a footer. A footer would basically be, it's basically a shade, you know, it's not bolded, it's not, it just sits shaded in the background of the title of the paper. Okay. So your first title, you're gonna put the title of your paper, you're gonna have to make up a title for your paper. Okay. Based on the subject area in which you're researching, based on your thesis. And maybe even the outcomes from your research. And then you're gonna have the introduction. And it's gonna look like this. And who knows, maybe your introduction will go up, you know, a couple paragraphs, maybe it goes a few paragraphs, depending on what you're trying to communicate. And the introduction could actually be a page. And the introduction would overlap with the abstract. So you basically, you can leverage. There's some overlapping between the abstract and the introduction, and the conclusions and the recommendation. And you'll probably have to go through this paper, maybe, if you get it together into a draft form, you probably need to go through it at least 5 times. Okay? And it's not a long paper, it should be like 20 pages or something like that. And then I would have the writing center look at it, and then I'll look at it, to get it so that it can be showable, you know, to people, so you can show it to somebody. Okay. So that's the introduction, and then you'll have the next will be the maybe it'll be the title of the next article, but it'll be at least some kind of permutation of the title of the next article. So I'm going to use the currencies as a recommendation, as an example. So on your second page, you're going to have a header that will say maybe your first article was on labor productivity effects on currency values. Maybe the title, that wasn't the exact title, but that was basically, you gotta make it sound academic or professional. So this will probably be in 14-point type. Okay. And bolded.
And that's the title
This
of
is your
the
header.
article?
This is the header.
Oh.
And it could be the title of your paper or you know, condensed major takeaway from that. You know, maybe the article is, you know, labor productivity effects, you know, on currency values in the European Union.
Can I take examples that are happening right now, like the Brexit, for example?
It depends on what your subject is on your paper. That's what we're going to go through later. So I've already gone around a couple times to check on everybody to make sure that they have a topic that they can do research on, that they can actually write a research paper on. So I can talk to you about that. And I think somebody else is doing Brexit in here too. Can I help you guys?
No, I was just asking. I'm telling.
No. If you're gonna ask questions, ask me. If you have a question, ask me. So what's your question?
What about the topic if you didn't approve it yet, or we didn't?
Then I have to come around and how many people are clear on the topic and how many people have already started their research on their paper? Raise your hands. Higher, so I know. Okay. You started already? You should.
Like, I'm not done with any of my articles.
No, that's cool, but you have a clear vision of what you want to research.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the three, you guys have, it's the attendance issue. Okay. Because you're the three guys who haven't attended the class the most. So I have to go over it with you guys again. So I will integrate it into the lecture, and if you're still confused, you need to talk to me. Okay? I don't mean to be, you know, hard on you guys, but I'm getting a little impatient, that's all. I'm under a lot of stress. With the fires. All right, so pull out your article review worksheet. once you see this, you'll go, oh, this is really easy for us, Susan, thank you very much. Making it easy for us. Do you have the article workshop? For example, I think it's one of them. Okay, Neil, can I borrow yours? Okay. Okay. So Neil's already got his filled out. Here's the journal one right here. So you're gonna need to, in your references, you're gonna have a reference page. Okay, at the end here, after your conclusions and recommendations. And it's a separate page. References. And you're gonna use APA. It's APA. American Psychological Association. So you're gonna use APA for that. If you don't know what it is, you can look it up. Then you're gonna have your first reference here, your second reference here, your third reference here, your fourth reference here, your fifth reference here, and you might even wanna add additional references. Because usually a lot of people, when they get into the research reports, they get sent to other articles or other reports that they're interested in, and they end up reading those too. So a lot of times there are 5 references, the 5 articles that I originally assigned to you, they may actually put in 10. Or they may actually cite some of the other articles that were cited in their article to basically beef up their references.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yeah.
You want us to cite every
No.
single, just the ones that we use?
No. Well, there was 2 things. You said, do we cite just the 5 articles, or do we cite everything? Or something in between? So the answer is no, no, yes.
What's the something in between?
I'm just explaining it. I basically said that of the 5 articles that you picked, there may be other articles within the articles that you've referenced, or you think should be listed within your references. And you can put them in there too.
Okay.
So 5 is just a minimum, but, I wouldn't have 20, but, 5 of your core references plus, some additional references of some other articles that may be seminal articles. Seminal articles are those articles that basically contribute the most to the literature, and that are cited in almost all of the research, by others that have gone after them. So there may be seminal articles or other articles that you want to cite or reference within your references, to have a more complete reference list. But a minimum of 5. If you want to do up to 20 or 25, that's not a problem, but you guys aren't, you're not doing a huge paper, but put as many in there that you feel comfortable that you think should be cited. Okay, and do them in alphabetical order too. You do them in alphabetical order using APA format. Okay. All right, and then you have the author's name, the institution, contact information, and the journal article. If you really get into your subject area, I would email the author. Say I'm writing a paper on, factors that drive currency values. Have you done any additional research, lately where you updated your paper? Or, maybe have an informal conversation with them, and then you can cite the author in the interview within your paper. And then you have the article summary. So right here, I would put the summary. So this is going to be your subheading.
Summary is the subheading?
Yeah, it should be something else. It should be not a general subheading. It should be like factors driving currency values, or productivity effects, or something like that. But just put summary in there for now, just to make it easy on you guys. And then the next is going to be, and then you have the data. Okay, talk about the data. What kind of data was used? What was the source of the data? What was the time interval? So you got to talk about the data. Time period. methodology, statistical models utilized. Methodology. Got it. And then tell me about it. Significant variables. Does this look familiar? Results. Recommendations. This could be major takeaways. Could be that. If your paper has to do with commercializing the research that you put together, if you've read these articles and you came up with a vision on how to commercialize it, then I would put recommendations for commercialization. Now, if I was doing a research paper on factors that drive currency values, could I basically take the research results from the 5 articles that I researched and come up with basically a methodology or a method to capitalize on those factors to trade currencies? If I know that labor productivity is a major factor that drives currency values, couldn't I basically analyze labor productivity rates across different countries and find metrics or indexes or measurements of labor productivity and monitor labor productivity over time? And if labor productivity is moving up over time, and there's a positive correlation between labor productivity and currency values, if I can identify a labor productivity trend, increasing labor productivity trends by country, and say, oh look, Japan's labor productivity gains have been slowing over the last 2 to 3 years, and have dropped off significantly over the last year. What do you think the value of the yen will probably do in the future? Probably go down. Exactly. And what about if you're looking at Thailand or Indonesia, an emerging market, and you've noticed that based on the measurements of productivity, using labor productivity indexes for those 2 countries, that you've noticed the productivity gains. Are you following along, or are you watching something else? Are you typing stuff up?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to see some typing. Don't be checking out your Facebook page or stuff like that. If there are trends in labor productivity for, let's say, Indonesia and Thailand, then you will assume that the Thai baht will probably appreciate over time due to those increased productivity gains. So you can use productivity gain measurements or indexes by country to be able to forecast currency values. So it's labor productivity gains is the factor, it's the independent variable, and the currency valuation is the dependent variable that you're trying to forecast. I can use that research paper that was done on labor productivity gains based off of the data and the methodology to be able to measure and forecast labor productivity gains across countries, and then use that knowledge to basically trade and buy and sell foreign currency on behalf of my clients in a strategic, tactical way. So I don't know, based on all of your subject matters, if the research that you're conducting can be commercialized, but that's the ideal situation. So me as an industry person will see that this academic, maybe academic in conjunction with some industry people, put together this model, conducted this research, came up with these results, and now are making recommendations for actually commercializing the research. Usually the academics don't do that, but industry people do that. We either work as applied industry economists within companies to do this kind of stuff, or what we will do is the academics will work with us, and we basically engage them to do the research, and then they give us the results, we modify the results for commercialization and then implement the results and commercialize it and take advantage of it. That's how we do it.
In terms of the paper, do you want us to create those subtitles for?
I would just make it simple. Yeah,
Alright.
just use these for now, then we can swap them out later if we want to. But just use these now for standardization purposes, to make the paper easier on you.
So this is mostly just for outlining, not necessarily for,
We'll see how things go.
okay.
So maybe, maybe this one article here is, is a couple pages. So what's 2 times 5? It's 10 pages right there. Okay, if you go to 3 pages, what's 3 times 5? 15. So your paper could be, 10 to 15 pages. It could be 20, I don't know. Including all of these. I don't even include these. I don't include any of these as the page counts. Because there's nothing on them. It's not paper, it's not part of the paper. It's not part of the word count.
Is front and back okay?
I'd like single spaced, line spacing, one side per page. You don't double side a paper like this. It's single, at least with the first draft. And then we'll double side it to condense it after it's all cleaned up. Okay. So do you understand what we're doing? So then basically you just replicate it 4 more times. Right? And then once you've read through and done all this stuff, then you're going to come up with, I would just go ahead and write the conclusions and recommendations off the top of your head, okay, if you can. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put the references on the back, and then you're going to have an appendix page. And it'll look like, the appendix page will look like this. It'll look like that. What goes in the appendix? What goes in the appendix? No, it's right there. You might actually put, some of you might want to put, some graphs or something, tables or charts that you can reference if you want to. See appendix, graphs, page, graph number 1. So you're referring the text to the graphs.
Like
instead of putting-
definitions too?
Huh?
Definitions too?
Yeah, you can put those in the back here too. So the reader, you're not taking up the content of the paper, you're referring them back to the appendix. So you can do that too. Yeah. And if you do definitions, to say definitions along the top,
Okay.
and then just put them in alphabetical order, if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what I would do is, after the appendix, I would do another. Anybody accountants in here? Any accountants in here? What you're gonna do is you're gonna take basically this, right, that you did, and you're gonna put it in the back here with a cover page on the back working papers. So these were the actual source documents in which you used to write your paper. So I have basically your source documentation. Okay. Then you have your appendix. Okay. Then you got your references, and then you're gonna have the paper. And what I would usually what I do is I set this up first. I will set up the paper and have a bunch of X's in here. Right? I would set them all up, try to set up as much as I can. Put a bunch of X's in here, so I'm basically seeing how the paper is structured and set up. And then basically you just go in and you just start filling stuff in, start replacing stuff. That's the easiest thing to do. The thing you need to be careful with is plagiarizing. Okay. If you're going to plagiarize, what I would do is don't copy and paste. Okay. I'm not gonna search for plagiarism with you guys, because it's just a waste of my time. But what I would do is, make sure, if you do cut and paste anything from another paper, you need to edit it down and move it around. Does that make sense? Huh?
Paraphrase, basically.
Well, yeah. So edit it down, move it around, you know, change it enough so it doesn't get flagged. Because the last thing you want to do is to get caught, you know, plagiarizing. And usually for you all, since a lot of you do not have experience in writing these papers, they will probably later on in your career in the academy, because you will be taking classes where they will check for plagiarism. And if you get caught, you can get in a lot of trouble. And it's even worse for people like me. Okay? And there's a lot of academics that have been caught plagiarizing with PhDs, tenure tracks at universities that have been fired. Okay? So you don't need to really plagiarize. You just need to put the effort in to do the editing to condense it down and then move it around. So the content's there, right? It's just editing it down and moving it around. I can usually tell when students haven't written something because they don't have enough experience in writing academic or professional industry papers. So it comes off pretty obvious. Okay? So just be careful, and I would really utilize the writing center. Maybe do one of these, go work with the writing center, get this thing cleaned up and use it as a template for the rest of your articles. So you're basically building a template with language, with sentences that have already been corrected for punctuation and grammar, that's all you gotta do is start swapping stuff out. The writing structure is there, you know, the section is already, the structure is there, and then you leverage it. Okay? That's how I would do it, to make it easier on you. So is everybody clear? Yeah, Laura.
For the article
Yeah.
one, so for that page.
Yeah, this references this.
Yeah. I still have, I don't know if this applies to anybody else, but I still have 2 articles to do.
Yeah.
Do you want me to still fill out this one or just move directly to the paper?
I still want you to do that because I want you to have the working papers.
Okay.
So that when you show the person the work that you did, it beefs up the paper, and when they see the working papers, they'll love it. Okay.
Okay.
Because people love the source documentation,
Yeah.
especially the actual article with your summarization.
Okay.
All right, so what I would do is do the title page, come up with an attempted abstract, put together your outline. Your outline should be pretty easy to put together. Your references, you already have the 5, or you should already have the 5 references. You just put 3 to just get the reference page going. Get an appendix page. Don't worry about that yet. And then get a working papers section, cover it, and start putting your stuff in there. And what I would do is just have a clip on your paper and just start swapping stuff in and out as you rewrite stuff. Okay, or start building it, right? And then start showing it. The professor sees a look at this. And when you read this, I went to the writing center, they looked at it, you know, here's what I got so far, will you take a look at it? Okay. And then the thesis statement should be tied to these. And then the conclusions and the recommendations are really key. So really what we do in business is for the introduction and for the abstract, it would be based on our research here and the following recommendations. And then you got the reader, right? Because they're gonna say, well, how can you make those recommendations? Well, now I'm gonna tell you about the research that I did. And these were the conclusions from the research. So these are the recommendations, based on the research. It's like, wow, you just hit the reader right in the face. Because you came out with recommendations, right off the bat, which is the most interesting part of the whole paper. Right? Because that's coming from you, or some of these other people. Right? Yeah.
Do you want us to include our graphs in the articles? In the
What?
paper? Or the graphs that we use?
This one?
Yeah, so like.
Yeah, these are gonna go in your working papers
Okay.
section back here.
Okay.
So the working paper is actually after the appendix. It should be,
I don't think he will.
Yeah.
say that again?
So like for the memos, if they apply.
No memos. This has nothing to do with the memos.
Yeah, but if we have, like for the article, say we have a graph that applies from the memo to the article, could we
You
include
mean the
that?
what do you mean the memo?
So
I think
like,
you're confusing the memos that we're writing with the paper.
Like you're doing the same asset.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I think there's confusion.
Do you know what I'm saying?
So,
I don't know how to probably
for
that.
example, I think what she's asking if one of the graphs in the memo applies to her article information. If she wants to add the graph in as evidence, would she can do that?
If you can, if it totally in here,
Or
You
could
go
we
in
put
here?
it in there, or like in the working papers? Just to like you said.
I would,
keep that a little-
what I would do is I would, in the appendix, I would have somebody said they wanted to do definitions. Definitions. Graphs. Charts. Tables. And then you could go graph. 1.0.
Mhm.
See graph 1.0 in the appendix.
Okay,
So
okay.
you could do it like that too. If you think that the graph is, even if you, I mean, you guys could even put in some of the graphs from the articles, right, or some of the tables from the articles in here,
Yeah,
if you think if it needs to be in the paper.
yeah, that's what I was trying
If
to.
it doesn't,
couldn't get it
then
out.
just say, see appendix graph, 1.0,
Okay.
and then that's it.
So
In
if
parentheses.
if you were to input the graphs or tables into the actual article stuff, would it go under results or data?
It's up to you, you have to tell me
Okay.
where it would go.
Okay.
Usually I would focus on the results,
Okay.
from the research. And then if you can do some desktop publishing and, maybe circle the area of the graph, and then put it into your paper.
Okay.
So you're guiding the reader, they're not having to like look at this graph and go, well, why is he showing me this graph? Or why are you showing me this table?
Okay.
If you put a nice red circle around it or around the section, the reader goes, you already talked about it, and you're guiding the reader right to the most important part of the chart and table and the graph. Okay. That's one of the biggest problems for all of us, a lot of us, is that we basically give stuff to people and we expect them to figure it out. Right? Business people don't have tolerance for that. Okay? You gotta walk us through it. If you say something, if there's something important, you need to point it out to us. Because it's time, right, at the end of the day. Right? I can't sit through a 2-hour meeting, a 1-hour meeting. You can make it easy and we can go through it in an hour or 40 minutes. 40 minutes with 20-minute Q&A, perfect. If you're gonna drag me into a meeting for 2 hours and go on and make me work to find the stuff and make me figure out what the major takeaways are, you're wasting my time. I can find somebody else who can do a better job communicating that stuff. Okay, what other questions? This paper could be one of the biggest things that you do in your career here. Okay? If you see that. Okay? It could be used for graduate school, it could be used for other jobs, it could be used as a master's thesis in an independent study. It could be used as an independent study, or an independent project here at Ludlow. It could be used to communicate with potential employers, your interests in certain areas. It's huge. And they're gonna expect you to be able to do this stuff. Okay. How much time do we have? Oh, that's it?
5
6
minutes.
minutes.
6 minutes?
Yeah.
But
Okay,
you said you wanted to get done 15:55.
I appreciate it. Who doesn't have it? You tell me, are you totally clear on your topic?
Not totally clear.
Okay, we'll go over it on Thursday. Are you clear?
Yeah.
Okay. No? Okay. Do you have articles?
Yes,
Do you have a
I
topic?
yes, but I would like to talk more about it.
Okay. Okay, awesome.
I have it, yeah.
Okay, why don't you make some progress, and then we're gonna go around on Thursday, and you're gonna present your paper proposal. So you might actually want to put together. Okay. It may be an abstract, and we'll go through it, and you'll present it, and then we'll create a dialogue around it, and we'll help each other, to clarify what the research, focus is gonna be, and then let's move forward with this with you.
It's fine,
Yeah, I don't know what your focus is. You're clear, aren't you? And then how are you?
Topic.
Okay, so come on Thursday. Do some research, find some articles, make it a agenda.
I'm clear on
Okay.
it.
You guys? Obviously. Okay, you might want to work with some of these other people that have clarifications.
This is new at the
Do as soon as possible.
picture of it.
I mean, it's the last part of the class is really.
Kind of a study right there in the Bay Area, different markets about the crash, market share findings in areas.
You can tell me. Yeah, you can take.
Not really. Buying houses, so that's where, and then you see all these different foreign investors coming into the market. But now we're starting to reach all kinds of
Sales in China.
no, that's like how much you're
Well, some are dependent on oil, some are dependent on the input of oil.
so we're now starting to understand that paying an all cash is actually hurting yourself. Where
If you do comparative studies, it's really interesting. So look at the same factors, it's just different countries.
So just compare the different.
Yeah, same type of analysis. Right? But it's gonna be, geopolitical factors affected by, volatile oil prices. Oil's effect on geopolitics in Iran,
Sending it in
or
the chat.
Saudi Arabia.
I sent the video, but it might be too fast.
Geopolitical effects of oil, on the United States. So you can do the same thing,
About the economy.
yeah, because there's an economic component to it, right? It's not only geopolitics, it's the geopolitics, the instability that creates supply disruptions, that causes the oil price spikes, that causes the cost inputs to spike, which causes the economies to slow significantly. Yeah, and some of those countries are export oriented,
Well, I turned
some of
into
them are
importers day.
import
Because I
oriented.
didn't notice this.
So you could do the United States and Germany,
Every day I turned it
two of the largest economies in the world.
So
Imports,
it's like,
and then you got, Saudi Arabia, Russia.
Probably back here, you could probably just take it.
Maybe, and,
I just don't know if you graded it or not.
who else?
Iran?
Maybe,
Qatar?
but think of something different. Definitely Russia, definitely, definitely Saudi Arabia, and there might be another, oil exporting, maybe you'll lump all the other ones, the Emirates together, or, yeah, I don't know. I would look at Saudi Arabia, maybe just other Arab Emirates. It's kind of maybe a cluster, because it's really Saudi, and then everybody else, right? Yes. Oh, sorry, Neil.
I just had a question. Did you finish reading my little?
Thank you. Let's